Well, let's switch to the domestic commodities market, and a research analyst at the FDC, Nosike Nwajide, joins us now. He's right here in the studio with us. Good morning, Nosike. Thanks for coming on the program.
Good morning. It's always my pleasure.
So let's take the conversation from where Mira left off, talking about the SON standards for the tomato value chain. What are your expectations from the standards?
My expectations are of increased efficiency in the near term. Increased efficiency, then towards self-sufficiency in the industry, then towards exports in the medium to long term. The losses, current losses, as she said, are close to 50%. I mean, if you can lower those losses, even if it's just by 25%, I mean, you have increased produce. If you can efficiently take them from where they are planted, harvested, and more efficient logistics towards where they are processed or towards the market, so that you lower the losses, then you can increase the output. Increased output also means lower prices in the market. In the end, it's more jobs for people in the processing plants. I mean, we Nigerians, we import tomato paste. We're a net importer. But I mean, if we could lower imports in the near term, in a year, 2 years, by half, that would increase the number of jobs, increase the number of increase output, affecting GDP growth, lower the amount we require to import these, forex, take some pressure off the forex demand. So all in all, it's positive for the Nigerian economy, and it's something that I feel that should have been done earlier.
Now let's switch now to the Monetary Policy Committee meeting of the Central Bank, which is holding today. Of course, we expect the briefing from the CBN governor at 2 p.m. later today. But what are the FDC's expectations from today's meeting?
Our expectations are that the MPC will hold on all, maintain status quo on all policy parameters. It's caught between, the outlook for inflation at the moment is a bit, it's not very rosy. Then you have a looming recession. We're probably already in a recession. It's Q2. So you have GDP growth on one hand and inflation expectations on the other hand that you expect to spike because of there's been a raft of intervention measures by the CBN. Money supply is expected to rise by at least 2 trillion. We've borrowed from the IMF about $3.4 billion. We expect to borrow more from the World Bank and the African Development Bank. These borrowings, so it's increased money supply in the Nigerian economy will have consequences on inflation. So the MPC is keeping a keen eye on inflation. There's also, the loss in forex proceeds from lower oil prices. There's increased pressures on the exchange rate. Pressures on the external reserves have somewhat abated because of increased borrowings, foreign currency borrowings that are 3.4 billion, another 3.5 billion, so that's $7 billion, and forex accretion is expected to take place in the coming months. But when you try to balance it, I mean, you need to those intervention measures. We need to watch out for what's impact. How do we estimate the impact now? We can't. So we'll probably wait till July before they can see, okay, what has happened so far, how much has the money supply grown. Then they can, move any levels. For now, we think that they will hold on all policy parameters.
But are we likely to see a further adjustment to the FX rate?
Well, given that, borrowing money from the IMF, there were some conditionalities. One of those was a unified exchange rate. The other one was a movement adopting a more flexible exchange rate, so to speak. I mean, at the moment, we're seeing forex accretion. So, those dollar earnings, increased dollar earnings, and then there have been measures by the CBN to curtail foreign currency demand. So, if in the end foreign exchange rate pressures persist, that might happen. But for the near term, I don't see that happening. I don't see the CBN adjusting the official or the IEFX. There'll be increased pressure on the parallel markets. It might go to the end of 460, 465 even. But for now, the official and the IFX rates are somewhat stable.
Well, let's talk about the capital importation data, which was released a few days ago by the NBS. Of course, we saw that hot money from portfolio investments pushed up capital importation to $5.85 billion for the period.
Yes, hot money is basically FPI. It's called hot money because it's money that can come in and easily go. It's very sensitive to movements in the exchange rate, movements in interest rates as well. Where what has not really been focused on is FDI. FDI is what creates jobs, investments, and ultimately GDP growth. Well, FPI is something that it's jumped by 50%, but going into Q2. is something we expect to fall significantly, given global developments and movement in capital. People, foreign portfolio investors are going to move to safe havens, maybe gold, but as the global economy, as more and more countries lift their lockdowns, and there's an increase in confidence, and investors also look at the steps that CBN taken to strengthen the exchange rate, so to speak, or unify the exchange rate. We look at all those policies and we might see increased FPI flows in Q3, but for now we expect that in Q2 it will fall significantly, and also FDI, not just FPI, but investments as a whole, will fall significantly in
Now
Q2.
let's talk about the fall in FDI. Now, of course, we saw a decline of 16.72% to $214.25 million. What was responsible for this?
Okay, in a more increasingly globalized world, FDI will flow to places where there are less constraints to production, so to speak. So it's something that an investor, you want to invest in Ghana, you want to invest in Nigeria, you want to invest in South Africa, you weigh all your options. Where do I have less constraints to production? We're all aware of the existing constraints to production in Nigeria: power, logistics, high interest rates, all of those issues. So it's something that's been somewhat on a declining trend since the recession of 2015. So until these constraints to production are tackled, so to speak, then we can see sustained increase in foreign direct investment inflows. For now, we expect that to keep fluctuating until investors gain confidence in the Nigerian economy.
And what about the external reserves now? Of course, we've seen a 5.55% rise to $35.77 billion. What would be the impact of dividend repatriation on the I&E window, for instance?
Well, obviously, increased forex supply means that the investors can now repatriate their money. I mean, some investors were scared with the external reserves had been depleting for so long, since I think about June or July last year, and obviously that continuous depletion, I mean, as an investor you keep an eye on it, but now that you've seen that there's been some accretion, you know that Nigeria is going to borrow more, and you've seen that there's been steps. Okay, oil prices are now rising, they're in the mid-30s, so to speak, but Nigeria's production is going to fall somewhat. So oil proceeds, how much are oil proceeds going to affect the reserves, and how much of that is actually external borrowing? But for now, there's obviously the ease of being able to repatriate your money, but something investors will keep a keen eye on. As oil prices rise, increased investor optimism and less pressure on the IEFX window.
And just before you go, Nosiko, tell us what's the latest with regards to domestic commodity prices?
Well, we'll continue to see the impact of the lockdown, so to speak, or movement restrictions. It's a curfew that affect. This is the planting season. They will affect the commodity supply chain, so to speak. So there will be some commodities, like last week we heard of the bakers saying that prices might rise as much as 60%, because all prices have risen. There's the exchange rate pass through, and there's scarcity because it's the planting season. So those factors contrive to push up commodity prices. So we expect that they keep rising until this lockdown movement restrictions are ended completely. So that factor will be taken away.
Research analyst at the FDC, Nosiko Nwajide, thanks for speaking with us on Business Morning.
Always my pleasure.